How many starships like USS Enterprise Starfleet had during Star Trek, the original series? In the classic Star Trek, the original series TOS, the USS Enterprise NCC 1701 was not just the centerpiece of the show, it was a symbol of the Federation's hope, exploration, and military strength. Yet one of the most tantalizing mysteries lingering beneath the surface of the series was this: how many ships like the Enterprise were out there in the galaxy during the TOS era? It's a question that Star Trek fans have debated for decades. While exact numbers remain elusive due to the inconsistencies and limited scope of 1960s television production, creative canon cross-referencing, behind-the-scenes materials, and later expanded lore offer enough fragments to construct a compelling picture. Let's boldly go and uncover how many Constitution-class starships, those comparable to the Enterprise, were part of Starfleet's mighty fleet during the time of Captain James T. Kirk. The Enterprise's class, Constitution-class starships. The first key to answering this question lies in identifying the type of ship the Enterprise was. During the TOS run, it was eventually established, both in dialogue and in various technical manuals, that the USS Enterprise was a Constitution-class heavy cruiser. This class of starships was Starfleet's top-of-the-line vessel in the mid to late 23rd century. Constitution-class ships were capable of Warp 8, outfitted with advanced phaser and torpedo systems, and capable of 5-year missions into deep space. They were essentially the equivalent of an aircraft carrier combined with a scientific research vessel, a mobile space fortress, and university in one. What TOS shows us: the on-screen clues. Despite being the flagship of the show, the Enterprise was rarely shown alongside sister ships. That wasn't due to narrative intent, it was a budgetary restriction. In the 1960s, reusing model shots and saving money on effects limited how many other ships could appear on screen. However, several Constitution-class starships do appear or are mentioned in TOS, giving us direct evidence that the Enterprise was not alone. Constitution-class ships mentioned or seen in TOS. 1. USS Enterprise NCC 1701, commanded by Captain Kirk. 2. USS Constellation NCC 1017 appears in The Doomsday Machine, commanded by Commodore Matt Decker. 3. USS Exeter NCC 1672 appears in The Omega Glory, commanded by Captain Tracy. 4. USS Defiant NCC 1764 seen in The Tholian Web, lost in interdimensional space. 5. USS Intrepid mentioned in The Immunity Syndrome, crewed entirely by Vulcans. 6. USS Lexington appears in The Ultimate Computer, commanded by Commodore Bob Wesley. 7. USS Excalibur, also seen in The Ultimate Computer. 8. USS Hood participates in the war games in The Ultimate Computer. 9. USS Potemkin, briefly mentioned in The Ultimate Computer. From these references, we can identify at least 9 Constitution-class vessels, though only a few are seen in detail. Most of these ships are mentioned in specific battle simulations or emergencies, implying they were part of Starfleet's heavy hitter squadron. The dilemma: just how many were there? The number of Constitution-class ships that existed during Kirk's 5-year mission is never explicitly stated in TOS. However, several clues suggest a number in the ballpark of 12 to 14. Gene Roddenberry's Writer's Bible and Production Notes. According to the Star Trek Guide, an internal document created by Gene Roddenberry and his team for writers, there were about a dozen ships like the Enterprise in service during the time of the original series. That number was likely created for narrative flexibility. It allowed the Enterprise to be unique, but not completely isolated. This about a dozen number has since become part of the semi-canon and informed many fan interpretations and licensed materials. The 12 like it line in TOS. One of the most direct in-universe references to how many ships were like the Enterprise comes from the episode Tomorrow is Yesterday. In that episode, Captain Christopher refers to the Enterprise as a ship unlike any other, and Kirk responds with a now famous line: "Greater than, there are only 12 like it in the fleet." This suggests that, at least in that moment, the Constitution-class roster consisted of 12 active vessels, possibly including the Enterprise. Whether this number was meant to include ships under repair, destroyed, or newly commissioned is unclear. But as a working number, it establishes a baseline. Extrapolating from later Star Trek canon, while TOS was limited in what it could show or say, later Star Trek series, especially Star Trek, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, and Strange New Worlds, expanded Starfleet lore significantly. From Star Trek, the motion picture 1979 onward, we learn more about the Constitution-class retrofit program, new classes of starships, and Starfleet's growing capabilities. By the 24th century, Starfleet had hundreds, possibly thousands of ships. But in the 2260s, things were much smaller and more centralized. Star Trek, Enterprise, and Strange New Worlds both confirm that the Constitution class was a flagship line even before Kirk's era, indicating they were built in relatively small numbers for elite missions. Thus, the idea that only a dozen existed makes sense. Constitution-class vessels were likely expensive, difficult to build, and deployed only for the most vital exploration, defense, or diplomacy missions. A tentative roster of the 12. If we take Kirk's line literally and imagine the 12 Constitution-class ships in existence during TOS, here's what the list might look like based on TOS appearances and retroactive continuity. 1. USS Enterprise NCC 1701. 2. USS Constellation NCC 1017. 3. USS Defiant NCC 1764. 4. USS Exeter NCC 1672. 5. USS Hood NCC 1703. 6. USS Excalibur NCC 1664. 7. USS Lexington NCC 1709. 8. USS Potemkin NCC 1657. 9. USS Intrepid NCC 1631. 10. USS Farragut NCC 1647. 11. USS Republic NCC 1371. 12. USS Valiant NCC 1705 speculative/expanded materials. Some of these registry numbers and names come from the Star Trek Encyclopedia, the Ships of the Line calendar, and various licensed sources, but they all fall within the general timeframe of Kirk's 5-year mission. Why so few? While a modern military might deploy dozens of similar ships, Starfleet wasn't a military in the strictest sense. It was also a scientific and exploratory organization, and Constitution-class ships weren't mass-produced like destroyers or frigates. These ships were long-range explorers, built to operate independently for years. Staffed with the best and brightest Starfleet had to offer. Experimental in many ways, their warp engines, weapon systems, and sensor arrays were among the most advanced. Exceptionally expensive, each ship was the product of immense engineering effort and Federation resources. It's also likely that while Constitution-class vessels got the spotlight, Starfleet had many smaller, less powerful ships. These might include science vessels, transports, scouts, and local defense ships. The Constitution class was the crown jewel, not the norm. What happened to the Constitution class? By the time Star Trek, the motion picture arrives, the USS Enterprise receives a full refit, indicating that the design was still valuable. In fact, several ships of the Constitution class were refitted and served well into the 2280s. However, by the time of the Next Generation in the 24th century, the class had been retired, replaced by newer classes like the Excelsior, Ambassador, and Galaxy. Still, the Constitution class's legacy lived on. Even into Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, which takes place a decade before TOS, we see that Constitution-class ships were already elite, featuring prominently in high-stakes missions. The S&W version of the Enterprise is still Constitution-class, albeit with updated aesthetics and tech for modern audiences. In the end, what does it all mean? If we take Captain Kirk at his word and accept the production notes and canonical,